Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the program. Today we're going to do the Scythian episode that I promised. It's going to be a pretty long episode, but longer than some of the more recent ones, not too long. But I want to go through some of the recent discoveries and go a little bit in depth into some of the context regarding the Scythians and these discovery gold and bronze and other types of pottery and combs and tools and stuff like that. We're going to get a little bit into demographics, the Greeks that were living there at the time, and their interactions and their stories of the Scythians and that entire, I guess you would call the horseback type of culture that they were living, that pastoralist culture that I've been talking about. So this is a 2,400-year-old, they're calling it a gold vessel, and it has a griffin and a dragon, I think, or a stag rather, a stag and a griffin. A griffin is like part lion, part eagle, part, I think, lizard or dragon, or I forget what the third part is, but it's a chimera type monster, and it was very significant in the Scythian culture. And they found these near, not mint, but basically able to touch these were probably the Scythians themselves that somehow escaped grave robbers and intrepid adventurers and black market people and stuff like that. So let's just get into everything. So the place that we're talking about is the scientific name of this round barrow, or kurgan, which is a burial mound, just for lack of a better term, to simplify things, a burial mound. It's called Sengaliv Sko 2, right? This is the name of the place. It's about 30 miles east of Stavropol, which is in the Caucasus region in southern Russia. And you can see here, it's right smack dab between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, right north of the Caucasus Mountains. And again, if you guys have seen some of the previous videos or done any surface level research on the Scythians themselves, you'll know that they tend to locate them, historians tend to locate them between the Black and Caspian Sea, as well as what's modern day Ukraine, and even as far east as Kazakhstan. This is during the period of 900 to about 900 BC to about 200 AD. But if you go even further back, it seems like their influence stretches even further, right at the mouth of the Danube River, and all the way even as close as, or as far as China, Western China. And the reason why they think that is because of these kurgan burial mounds, as well as some of these vessels and other leftovers of their culture that they find, as well as other things like more peripheral things like taming of horses, domestication of horses, horseback, archery, all these things indicative of their culture that you see way later down the road, even within the Mongols themselves. Anyway, I'm digressing here. So they find this small mound in a farmer's field at this site here near the Caucasus Mountains, and they find out that it's a kurgan. They come in, they start looking, they start doing excavations, and at the surface level, there were looters there. There were people who came in. There was some tampering between 2,400 years ago is the rough date. So about, like 400 BC, something like that, 500 BC. But they dug even further. The surface level, there's human tampering and stuff like that. And then they dig in, and then there's this natural feature of the landscape, and they dig, it looks like some sort of bedrock type of feature that would deter most looters from digging even further. They dug further and they found a stone box, which is a foot deeper, and they found a fingers, rib bones from a teenager. And then they dug even deeper. They found 2 gold vessels that were completely untouched. Beneath those lay 3 gold armbands, a heavy ring, 3 smaller bell-shaped gold cups, and all of these artifacts that the first looters did not find. And these are some of the bracelets here, or armbands. They're pure gold. And the thing is, with the Scythians, most of the stuff that they were working with was bronze. It wasn't necessary. It was very rare to find gold. So because of this, The researchers thought, okay, not only is this a kurgan, this might have been a very high-ranking, even like a king type of, like king level type of status that we're talking about here in terms of the person who is involved. A teenager, right, who's buried with all this stuff is very interesting. It's very peculiar. So they got the green light to excavate even further. Instead they excavated around the kurgan, and then they found post holes near the stone box that they found, which is basically, it seemed to have supported a roof or some sort of pavilion. So they think because of that, there might have been like battle standards or flags or something, a very ornate type of temple grounds or something. It would have been a huge deal. And Herodotus even talks about this, which we'll get into a little bit later. Herodotus, if you don't know, he's an ancient Greek historian who sought out to, in his own words, he wanted to describe Greek history, what he saw as he understood it, and he did the field work, and he tried to write down as much as he could. And so part of his adventures took him to the Black Sea and around this area, and he described some of the Scythian cultures, and even some of the Greeks who did work for them, which we'll go into in a little bit. So it was, by this point, it was very clear that they found something just beyond just a burial mound. Again, they're thinking that it was the site of some sort of intense ritual or burial rites, or something to do with the king, like I mentioned before, maybe some sort of ceremony. But now, okay, time for some context. So 900 to 100 BC, there are these tribes that dominated the steppes of the grasslands of Eurasia. I talked about this in a few videos, and they were a loose conglomeration of people. So a lot of them came through the Caucasus and into what's now Persia or Iran, and they fought off the Assyrians. They went into Turkey. Those same people went from Turkey into the Levant and into Egypt. And when they got to Egypt, they were paid off essentially to go away. And they did. And the interesting thing, and I'm going to do a little bit of an aside here, this is how ancient we're talking about these people are, these steppe people, for lack of a better term, these Scythians. When I say Scythians, I'm not using it in the archaeological term. I'm using it in the more broad term, these Scythian-like people. The ancient Egypt goes back to about 3200 BC, which is coincidentally around the start of the Bronze Age. Make of that what you will. The ancient Egyptians of those days, when they talk about the Scythians, or in the broad term again, they say the Scythians go back even further than the ancient Egyptians themselves. So that's very interesting. It's not like they were these new invaders that came out of nowhere. They were probably living around well before recorded history, circa 3000 BC onward. Okay, so again, 900 to 100 BC. These people are all over Western China, all the way to the Danube, and these people, the reason why they're lumped together is because they shared core cultural practices, one of which are the kurgan burial type of mounds that I just talked about. They were heavily socially stratified. They had monumental burial structures, rich grave goods. They were all interconnected somehow, although not all of them were different. So we had the Cimmerians, we had the Hallstatt culture, all these different types of people. The Celtic people are heavily thought to have descended or branched off from the Scythians, these steppe people. They had a horse-centered lifestyle, they're nomadic, all of these things. They weren't a single political entity. Regional differences in their art, artifacts, and burial practices. They're different. Obviously, they're unique in their own way, but as a whole, they were more or less the same. They had more or less the same culture. Again, a collection of tribes who spoke related languages, had a broadly shared artistic and material culture. They did not write much down, although there are a lot of stories from Roman and Greek accounts of their dealings with these people. So we have these secondhand accounts and these ancient myths and legends regarding them, which are being corroborated in the depictions of some of these vessels. which is a whole nother level of interesting there. So he says the main source we have is texts from other cultures, primarily Greeks and Romans. Ancient Greeks dismissed their neighbors to the west as mare milkers and drunks. So that's another thing that we have to keep in mind here when we look at these historical accounts, is they are biased accounts. We don't know the entirety of what they were written. We just know that what we have now mostly dismisses the Scythians as such, as barbarians, as uncultured. They don't have the gift of civilization and laws and stuff like that. That's what we're told. Who knows if the pro-Scythian stuff, or the stuff that the Greek accounts wrote to them that's not so dismissive. Who knows if that was burned strategically along the way of history. We don't know for sure, but it would be a fool's endeavor or a fool's position to say that everything that survives is all that was written. So that's just something to take with a grain of salt. The Scythians periodically crossed the Caucasus Mountains to terrorize the Assyrians. We talked about that. And these are, again, we have these Scythians being depicted by the Persians here on horseback and such. And then we have the Greeks also, and this is about 600 BC, 500 BC or something like that. 400 BC. This is depicting a Scythian with his horse again. So these people obviously did exist if there are other civilizations contemporary with them writing stuff down and mentioning them consistently. So uncovered Scythian tombs in the Altai Mountains, again, where Russia, China, Mongolia, and Kazakhstan meet. They are preserved by permafrost and ice, so that's why these grave goods and bodies are still around. So, again, this Belinski, who, again, is the head of this excavation, he's the first to find such golden treasure in the Caucasus. So this area must have been either the capital or a very, very significant place among the greater area of the Scythians, just because of the gold that happens to be there. The potholes in the ground that seemed indicative to hold pillars, which held up roofs, and then battlements and all of these things. Some sort of royalty must have been based there, is what they're thinking. Here's a comb, again depicting a rider and fighting two other soldiers here. Dates to 4th century BC in eastern Ukraine. So again, that's along the Black Sea here, which is again a known place where the Scythians were. The quality of these objects, again, cannot be understated. Their craftsmanship is nearly unique. Again, it's pretty much pure gold. The vessels are likely not the product of the Scythians themselves, however. So they think that these were made by Greek craftsmen working on commission for the Scythians. And that is known because Herodotus wrote about that. He wrote about some Greeks who would take on these jobs for the Scythians and create these, use their knowledge of craftsmanship and stuff like that. One thing that I would like to know is, because I did a few episodes ago, I did one about mining and gold mining and copper mining and bronze metalworking from about 3000 BC or so, around there. I wonder where the gold here was mined and sourced. I think that would be a logical path to take in the wake of all of this these new discoveries and these new working conclusions that they have. So some things that they noticed: crusty patches of sticky black residue on both. They tested positive for opium and also cannabis particles as well, and that confirms stories from Herodotus. Again, he's getting corroborated by modern day science, because they would have these rituals where they would get in a hut and essentially hotbox themselves and speak with the spirits and do this on very important occasions, one of which would probably be the death of a royal, or the birth of a royal, or maybe in the wake of a conquest, something like that. They found hemp seeds. Herodotus goes into specifics about their vapor bath, their hot boxing and all that stuff. What they would do, they would shout for joy and dance and all these things. They also found small metal pipes and frozen tombs far to the east. So again, we see this consistency all along a vast amount of land. Okay, so this just goes to show you how much we really don't know exactly what was going on. So if you had a time machine, that would be a great place to go to, maybe about 3,500 BC, see what was going on back there in that area. What did the Greek and Romans leave out, or what did they fail to write down? What did they not know? What were they not privy to in terms of the Scythians and these steppe people? So again, the fact that they found opium and cannabis, again, is indicative of a more meaningful ritual. They must have had some sort of deep-seated traditions if they were doing this for God knows how long they were doing this. But it can't be they were just a unique batch of people that just happened to do this from happenstance. They're probably carrying out traditions of even more old than they are, that probably go back to way further back in time that we might can't even conceive of, because again, we haven't found the clues. So again, they would also drink certain concoctions and have all these different sacred rites that they would prepare for. Cultic connections with such rare substances are very important. Obviously, it's a hallmark of a deep-seated tradition that was important enough for them to carry out and pass on to the following generations. So again, the collection of these types of artifacts at this location provides a strong clue as to what may have been happening on that hilltop with its majestic view of the valley below in 400 BC. So again, this site was strategically located where they could see everything around them. I did a video on an article about lidar that they found in Peru in the tops of the Andes. They scanned it for lidar and they found a completely new city that they had overlooked that was also strategically located. They could see down into the valley and see who was coming up for miles, well before that the other people could see them. So again, this is strategic location. It must have been important enough to move some of the highest ranking and some of the most important people of their time. Another interesting thing of this thing depicted in this burial, or in this vessel rather, are an older soldier killing a younger soldier, and that's depicted several times in this vessel here. And Herodotus, again, now you be the judge, but Herodotus is being corroborated again, because he talked about a time, just really quick, one of the Scythian stories is when they went down into Persia and fought the Assyrians, the women stayed behind and they were just with the slaves. But the men, they went down into they went to Persia, they went into Turkey, they went through the Levant all the way to Egypt. And again, this story of the Scythians coming down is corroborated by the Bible, in the Old Testament, and through archaeology in the Levant, because they did find Scythian weapons and types of tools there. And I did that in a video a few months ago as well. So all of these things are connected, and the story checks out from many different sources. That's all I'm saying. So while they're gone, the women thought, whoa, they've been gone for years now. Maybe they all died. They didn't know, they were left in the dark for a while. So then they married their slaves. The women married their slaves. And then when the men came back, like a decade later or however many years, they found that, oh wow, there's a completely new generation of people here. So they had to clean house. They killed everybody. They killed the slaves. They killed the slaves' children. And this was a very famous. It was a story famous enough for Herodotus to write it down, and then they find something similar of old soldiers killing young soldiers here. Now, is this a smoking gun of Herodotus's story? No, because this could also be symbolic. This could also be a metaphor for something else, and we could be jumping to conclusions. All I'm saying is that that's an interesting story that is somewhat related. You guys be the judge if this is exactly what Herodotus was talking about. But either way, it is an interesting thing to consider. And then again, another thing is the vessels had these images of these griffins, right? The Scythian bodies that they found from China all the way to Russia, all the way to Mongolia, they had these same tattoos on their bodies. So again, this is not to be underestimated. The griffin is a very significant symbol in their culture, and who knows exactly what it means. But they have pottery depicting griffins killing things, killing stags. So maybe it's just a symbolic representation of their people, of their genetics, of their culture, whatever it is. They are the griffin. And they're tattooing it on their bodies as well, which is very interesting. They are nearly identical versions of mythological creatures depicted on gold objects from tombs near the Black Sea. So again, they're finding the same symbology again. If you guys are familiar with Martin Sweatman, he does zodiacal dating. Maybe the griffin represents something in the zodiac to them. I don't know exactly which part the griffin could correspond to in the zodiac. Maybe Ursa, maybe Leo. I'm not sure. Maybe Cygnus, because again, it has wings, but it's also a lion and all these different things. I'd have to ask Martin Sweatman that. If you guys know who Martin Sweatman is and you follow him on Twitter or something, hit him up and ask him about this. So yeah, anyway, let me know what you guys think about this. There's a little bit more to the story, but I'm pretty much beating a dead horse here. I'll have a link to the actual article in the description, and you guys can check it out. But yeah, the Scythians are a very interesting people. Not only that, this place here that we're talking about, this will be the last thing, and then we'll end it. The Sengaliv Sko 2 site that we've just been talking about. There are dozens and dozens of nearby sites, dolmens, burial chambers, other barrows, other kurgans, these silver mounds. All of these different Bronze Age settlements are nearby this area. So again, I think this is a very significant area, very holy, very sacred area that would be a good seeding point, origin point, if you will, as far as we can tell, of these steppe people. So anyway, let me know what you guys think about this. I think it's super interesting. There are a lot of different opinions. If you guys know about the Trojan War, which is about 1000 BC, 900 BC, around there, maybe even further, they speak of the Scythians as well. Homer, who was Homer, right? No one's sure. He might have been Greek, an Ionian Greek maybe, but what was their relationship, the Trojans, to the Scythian people? Because no doubt about it, it's not like these two, the Greeks and the Turks, right? Or actually the Greeks are the Turks before the actual Turks that we know now came in. But before that, the Greeks and the Scythians were two different types of people who were coexisting or contemporaneously anyway. So it's hard to believe that they weren't involved in each other's affairs to a certain degree. So let me know what you guys think about that, if you have any comments about that, and I'll talk to you guys later.